Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's Wednesday. We're going to do a Rashi from the fourth Aliyah of Parshas Vayikra. We've been talking about the progression of Korbanos mentioned here at the beginning of the Parsha, at the beginning of Sefer Vayikra. The Parsha opens with the possibility of bringing a Korban Ola. And then yesterday we moved into the Aliyah, which talks about the Korban Mincha and various forms of the Korban Mincha. Actually, 2 days ago, we talked about the Korban Mincha. Yesterday, we talked further about the end of the Aliyah, about the Korban Mincha, the various forms of the Korban Mincha, and the lack of chametz, and the lack of sweetness, and all of those things. Today's Aliyah transitions to the third type of sacrifice mentioned in Vayikra, which is, as was mentioned a minute ago, the Korban Shlamim. All three of these are voluntary korbanos, as I've mentioned, the Korban Ola, the Korban Mincha, and the Korban Shlamim. There is one difference, which is that the Korban Ola, although voluntary, most of the time comes as a voluntary act in response to something that was done wrong. As I mentioned a couple of days ago, the Korban Ola was brought by a person who violated a commandment for which there is no punishment and no sacrifice. They want to do something, so they can just bring this generic Korban Ola, the burnt offering. It's brought by someone who violates an Isser Lav, an Isser Aseh, I'm sorry. They fail to perform a positive commandment, so there's no repercussions for that in terms of punishment or in terms of sacrifices. They just didn't seize the opportunity to actively do the mitzvah. They can also bring this korban as a means of atonement. So most of the times that these korbanos are brought, or even the korban mincha, might have been brought in response to a sin of some sort, to a mistake of some sort. If you could afford to bring korban ola, you would. If you couldn't, you would bring a korban mincha, which is the flour offering. There are other cases where those voluntary korbanos are brought, but the bulk of them surround those types of situations. And so now we move to the korban shlamim. Now I want to read you the Rashi about why it's called Korban Shlamim. As I mentioned, there's discussion of why the Ola is called Korban Ola, but most simply put, it's Ola because the entire thing is raised up. It's entirely burnt up. It goes up to Hashem as opposed to human beings. So it's Ola. It's the rising offering, the burnt offering, whatever you want to call it. Mincha has to do with the flour. But what's the name Shlamim come to signify? Im Zevach Shlamim Korbano. If you want to bring a Korban Shlamim, here's how you bring it. What does shlamim mean? So Rashi quotes two ideas. Shlamim, shemitilim shalom ba'olam, and shlamim, sheyesh behem shalom lamizbeach, lekohanim, v'lebalim. So there's two aspects to shlamim, both having to do with shalom, with peace. So shlamim would come from the word peace, and would either signify that peace that's brought into the world because of korban shlamim, or peace that's brought between all the parties involved in the sacrifice of this korban. So let's start with the second one, which is a little bit easier to understand. It brings peace between the Mizbeach, which represents Hashem, the Kohanim, and who are doing the sacrifice, and the owners who are bringing the sacrifice. And the reason for that is because this is the only type of korban shlamim, where the meat is shared by all three parties. So part of it is burned, that's for Hashem. Part of it is eaten by the Kohanim, and part of it is eaten by the owners themselves who are bringing the sacrifice. So it creates a camaraderie, it creates a shalom, a peace, a relationship between all these three parties who all have a chelek, they all have a portion, and they all take part, so to speak, in this particular sacrifice, as opposed to a korban ola, which is entirely for Hashem, or other korbanos, which are eaten by the Kohanim, but not by the owners. So most of the time, it's only one of the parties that's getting to partake. Over here, it's three parties, so it brings shalom, it brings peace of some sort between all these three parties. This broader one, the first one that Rashi mentioned, Metilim Shalom Ba'olam, it just brings peace into the world, is a little hard to understand. I didn't have a chance to look at the Mefarshim on Rashi. I would imagine what it means is that when you have a Korban Shlamim, and the meat is eaten by the owners, you have a certain requisite amount of time in which you're allowed to eat the meat of the Korban Shlamim, after which you can't eat it anymore. And therefore, you might invite other people to partake of the meat of the sacrifice, just like you would for a Korban Toda, just like you would for the Korban Pesach. And therefore, by sharing that experience with others, not necessarily Hashem or the Kohanim, but other peers, you're also creating shalom in the world, just in the broader world, outside of the Mikdash, outside of the Mizbeach, because you're bringing people together, you're having a shared meal, you're having a shared experience. So that's a shalom, peace-bringing type of experience as well. The other possibility is that it brings shalom to the world because it brings inner peace to people. People are moved to bring a korban for whatever reason, and they're raised to a higher spiritual level, a higher lofty type of feeling. So that benefits the individual, and by benefiting that individual, they're more at peace. By them being more at peace, it increases the peace of the world. Those are two ideas that I thought might explain this first stitch of Rashi over here. But both Rashi's explanations hone in on the idea of shalom. Other Mefarshim, like the Ramban, for example, focus in not on shalom, but on shlamim being related to shleimut, which is completeness or wholeness. Now, of course, the two are related. Shalom and shleimut are very much related terms and related concepts, but slightly different. Shalom is more about relationships and peace, whereas shleimut is wholeness. And the Ramban says perhaps it's the reason it's connected to wholeness and completeness is for the reason I mentioned at the beginning, because a korban shlamim is brought voluntarily by a person who didn't do anything wrong. They're whole, they're complete, as opposed to a person who might have made a mistake and they want to bring a korban olah to fix it, to fill the void, to repair something. So they're coming not as a whole person, they're coming, as someone with a mistake or a failure, and through the korban, perhaps that'll be fixed or perhaps that'll be repaired. But when they come, they're not whole. But the person coming with the shlamim is whole to begin with. So they're called shalim, called complete. They're called whole types of sacrifices. That's another idea, which is related, again, more to shlemut or completeness than it is related to shalom, as Rashi interprets. But these are two trends or two strands, how to explain the word shlamim. In general, the korban shlamim is a fascinating korban. But in the end of the day, we've learned about three right now. We've learned about olah, mincha, and shlamim. And there's a fascinating tie into Pesach, which all of us are thinking about and relating to, which is that the Korban Pesach, which was the centerpiece of the experience of Pesach for so many generations, unfortunately not for ours, is a unique type of Korban. It's like none other. It does fit into some of the paradigms of Korbanos, but it's very different. Main difference is it's not brought on the Mizbeach. Could be brought outside the Mizbeach of the Beis HaMikdash, as it was. So that's strange. It's eaten, in a different way. There's specific halachos to it. There's no Kohen necessarily involved in the same ways with our Korban. There are various types of unique halachos to the Korban Pesach that make it different. But in some ways, it's similar to the Olah. In some ways, it's similar to the Shlamim. And in some ways, it's similar to the Minchas. I just want to point that out because we've been learning about these various sacrifices. So the Korban Olah, in terms of the type of animal, sorry, I'm getting backwards. So the Korban Pesach requires, a male animal that has no mum. A shlamim has a male or female that has no mum, but it's similar in that way. The Korban Pesach, let's see, another similarity I was thinking about. Is consumed by the people themselves, by the owners, and so too a korban shlamim is consumed by the owners. So that's similar to olah in terms of the type of animal, slightly. In terms of the eating, it's similar to the shlamim, and in terms of the mincha, it's similar because it's not brought with chametz. And therefore, that's one of the salient features of the Korban Pesach. It can not only not be brought with chametz, but it can even be eaten with chametz, etc., which is, of course, the piece that we brought out of the Korban Mincha as well. So it has similarities to all these korbanos, but it's not exactly like any one of them, which makes it quite unique and something to think about in terms of the uniqueness of the experience of Pesach and what it might have been in the times of the Beis HaMikdash. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.